The morning alarm echoed through the massive warship as Commander Ben Torres opened his eyes. 3 years of war had taught him to wake instantly, ready for whatever crisis awaited. He sat up in his small quarters, looking at the wall where dozens of pictures hung. Images of Earth, of his family, of the soldiers who had fought beside him. Some of those soldiers would never see home again. Ben stood and walked to the mirror. His face looked older than his 35 years. Gray streaks ran through his dark hair and lines creased the corners of his eyes. The war against the Void Swarm had aged everyone who fought in it. But today felt different. Today the Galactic Council would make their final decision about the Swarm homeworld. He began putting on his armor piece by piece. The power suit was a marvel of human engineering, enhanced with technology from a dozen allied species. Each plate bore scars from battles across the galaxy, burn marks from swarm energy weapons, scratches from their razor-sharp claws. Every mark told a story of survival. The chest piece carried the insignia of the combined fleet. Ben had earned the right to wear it through 3 years of impossible victories. He had turned losing battles into triumphs. He had saved entire worlds from swarm destruction. The other species respected him for his tactical mind and his courage in battle. But respect was not the same as acceptance. Ben knew this truth better than most. He finished putting on the armor and made his way through the corridors of the flagship. Soldiers of many species saluted as he passed. The tall, blue-skinned Altarians with their 4 arms. The small, quick Viridians who moved like silver shadows. The massive Cronians whose rocky skin could stop most weapons. All of them had learned to follow human leadership in this war. The command center buzzed with activity. Holographic displays showed the positions of both fleets. The Void Swarm had pulled back to their homeworld after losing battle after battle. Intelligence reports suggested they were preparing for a final desperate stand. The combined fleet had grown to over 10,000 ships, the largest military force in galactic history. Commander Torres, called Captain Mills, one of the few other humans on the flagship. The council meeting begins in 1 hour. Ben nodded. Any new intelligence reports? Yes, sir. The overnight reconnaissance drones brought back interesting data. Mills handed him a data pad. The swarm seems to be transmitting between their ships in patterns we have not seen before. Our computers cannot decode the messages, but the frequency is very high. Ben studied the information. For months, human intelligence teams had been tracking changes in swarm behavior. The aliens had become less aggressive in recent weeks. Their attacks seemed more defensive than offensive. Some human analysts believed this might indicate a willingness to negotiate. Most of the other council species disagreed. Ben made his way to the council chamber, a vast room at the heart of the flagship. Representatives from 12 species sat in a circle, each at a station designed for their particular biology. The Zephyrians needed crystalline platforms that channeled specific light frequencies. The aquatic depths dwellers required water-filled environments. The energy beings existed in contained force fields. At the center of the circle stood a holographic display showing the swarm homeworld. The planet was dark and twisted, covered in the biomechanical structures the swarm used for everything from cities to weapons. Intelligence estimated that over 50 billion swarm creatures lived on that world. High Admiral Kess of the Zephyrians called the meeting to order. Her crystalline form caught the light and split it into rainbow patterns across the chamber walls. The Zephyrians were among the oldest species in the galaxy, and they considered themselves the most advanced. They had been fighting the swarm longer than anyone else. Today we decide the fate of the Void Swarm, Kess announced, her voice carrying through translation devices to all present. Our forces surround their homeworld. They cannot escape. We have the power to end this war forever. The other council members murmured agreement. General Vex of the Cronians, his voice like grinding stone, spoke first. The swarm has killed billions of our people. They have destroyed entire solar systems. They deserve no mercy. Agreed, said Admiral Finns of the aquatic depths, bubbles rising in her water chamber. Every day we delay gives them more time to prepare their defenses. We should attack immediately. Ben listened as each council member voiced similar opinions. Strike fast. Strike hard. Destroy the swarm completely. It was the same conversation they had been having for weeks. The same answer to every question about the war. Finally, Admiral Kess turned to him. Commander Torres, you have been silent. What is the human position on this final assault? Ben stood, his armor plates shifting with a soft mechanical hum. He looked around the circle at the assembled leaders. These beings had trusted him to lead their forces in battle. They had followed his strategies and tactics. But he knew that trust had limits. "I believe we should attempt communication before we attack," Ben said clearly. The chamber fell silent. Several council members exchanged glances that did not require translation. "Communication?" General Vex asked, his rocky features showing confusion. "Commander, the swarm does not communicate. They only destroy." "That may not be entirely accurate," Ben replied. He activated his personal display, showing the intelligence data Mills had given him. Recent reconnaissance suggests changes in their behavior patterns. Their transmissions have increased dramatically. Their attacks have become more defensive. These could be signs that they are reconsidering their position. Admiral Finn's made a sound like water rushing over rocks. "Commander Torres, you have fought the swarm for 3 years. You have seen what they do to captured worlds. How can you suggest negotiating with such creatures?" "Because," Ben said, choosing his words carefully, "I have also seen what war does to everyone involved. The swarm may be acting out of desperation rather than pure aggression. If there is even a small chance of ending this without destroying an entire species, should we not try?" The chamber erupted in voices speaking a dozen languages. The translation system struggled to keep up with the overlapping arguments. Ben heard fragments of familiar complaints. Humans were too soft, too emotional, too willing to see good where none existed. Admiral Kess raised her hand and the chamber fell silent again. The light patterns across her crystalline form seemed colder, sharper. She stood and walked to the center of the circle, her movements creating musical tones as light passed through her body. "Commander Torres," she said, her voice carrying a weight that seemed to press down on everyone in the room. "For 3 years we have followed human leadership in this war. Your species has proven skilled at tactics and brave in battle, but this suggestion reveals something troubling about human nature." Ben felt the attention of every being in the chamber focus on him. The air itself seemed to grow heavy. "Humans," Kess continued, her words precise and cutting, "always believe your primitive empathy can solve what superior minds cannot. You are here because you fight well, not because you think well. Your species' obsession with finding good in monsters has already cost us 3 colonies. Perhaps it is time we remembered that some creatures exist only to be destroyed." The words hit Ben like physical blows. Around the circle he saw other council members nodding in agreement. 3 years of victories, 3 years of proving human worth in battle, and it all came down to this moment. To these words, Kess was not finished. She moved closer, her crystalline features reflecting the holographic image of the swarm homeworld. "Some minds," she said, her voice now filled with ancient disdain, "are too simple to grasp this truth. The Zephyrians have been fighting galactic threats for 10,000 years. We understand realities that younger species cannot comprehend. Your emotional thinking endangers this entire operation." Ben stood perfectly still as the words washed over him. He felt the weight of every gaze in the chamber. The Cronians with their stone faces showing approval of Kess's words. The aquatic depths dwellers creating agreeable bubble patterns. The energy beings pulsing with harmonious frequencies. None of them spoke in his defense. None of them questioned Kess's assessment. In this moment, Ben understood something that 3 years of war had hidden from him. He was not truly their equal in this council. He was their weapon, useful in battle but not trusted with important decisions. Slowly, Ben reached up and touched the helmet release on his armor. The magnetic locks disengaged with a soft click that seemed unnaturally loud in the silent chamber. He lifted the helmet off and set it down on the floor beside his feet. The council members watched in confusion as Ben continued removing his armor. Each piece came off with deliberate care. The shoulder guards that had deflected swarm energy blasts. The arm plates that bore the scars of close combat. The chest piece with its command insignia and battle honors. "Commander Torres," Admiral Finns called out, her voice uncertain. "What are you doing?" Ben did not answer. He continued his work, setting each piece of armor down with the same precision he had used in planning battle strategies. The gauntlets that had held human weapons alongside alien technology. The leg plates that had carried him across 100 battlefields. The power core that had kept him alive in the vacuum of space. When the last piece touched the floor, Ben straightened. He wore only his simple uniform now, the basic clothes of a human soldier. No armor. No weapons. No insignia of rank or authority. Around him, the armor pieces lay like the shed skin of some mechanical creature. The chamber remained silent. Even the constant background hum of the ship's systems seemed quieter, as if the entire vessel was holding its breath. Ben looked around the circle one final time, at Kess with her crystalline arrogance, at the other council members with their certain knowledge of human inferiority, at the holographic display showing the swarm homeworld, where 50 billion creatures waited for death or salvation. "You are correct, Admiral Kess," Ben said, his voice calm and clear. "Some minds are too simple to grasp certain truths." He turned and walked toward the chamber exit, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Behind him, confused voices began to rise in a dozen languages. Questions, demands, orders to return. Ben heard them all and answered none. The chamber doors closed behind him with a soft hiss, cutting off the voices of the Galactic Council. In the corridor beyond, human soldiers stopped and stared as their commander walked past without his armor, without his rank, without the symbols that had defined him for 3 years. Ben Torres walked through the corridors of the flagship, past the command centers and weapon stations, past the barracks where soldiers prepared for the final battle. He walked past the memorial wall where the names of the dead were inscribed in 100 different scripts. He walked past the observation deck where Earth was visible as a tiny blue point among the stars. He walked away from everything he had built, everything he had earned, everything he had fought to protect. Behind him, the greatest military force in galactic history prepared to destroy an entire species. Ahead of him lay only uncertainty and the weight of his own choices. But for the first time in 3 years, Ben Torres felt truly free. Ben Torres stood in the small shuttle bay, looking at the single-person craft before him. 3 days had passed since he walked away from the Galactic Council. 3 days since he set down his armor and rejected their plan to destroy the swarm homeworld. The flagship continued its preparations for the final assault, but Ben was no longer part of those plans. Captain Mills approached from behind, carrying a small bag of supplies. "Sir, I still think this is madness. 1 shuttle against the entire swarm fleet? You will not even make it past their outer defenses." Ben took the supplies and loaded them into the shuttle. "Maybe not, but I have to try." "The Council has already replaced you," Mills said quietly. "Admiral Kess is leading the assault herself. The attack begins in 6 hours. Even if you reach the swarm homeworld, you will be caught between 2 armies." Ben paused in his preparations. He knew Mills was right. The chances of success were incredibly small. But the alternative was the complete destruction of an entire species. 50 billion lives ended without even attempting to understand why the war had started. "Tom," Ben said, using Mills' first name for the first time in years, "do you remember why we joined the military?" Mills nodded. "To protect Earth. To defend humanity." "And what makes humanity worth defending?" Mills was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Our ability to choose a better path, even when it seems impossible." Ben smiled and climbed into the shuttle. "Then you understand why I have to do this." The shuttle's engines hummed to life. Ben ran through the pre-flight checks, his hands moving automatically through procedures he had performed hundreds of times. But this flight was different from all the others. This time, he was not leading a fleet into battle. He was not carrying weapons or armor or the authority of the Galactic Council. He was carrying something far more dangerous: hope. The shuttle bay doors opened, revealing the vast darkness of space. Ahead, the swarm homeworld hung like a dark jewel against the stars. Its surface was covered in the biomechanical structures the swarm used for everything. Cities that looked like living organisms. Weapon platforms that pulsed with organic rhythms. Orbital defenses that moved like predatory creatures hunting in the void. Ben piloted the shuttle away from the flagship, heading directly toward the swarm homeworld. Behind him, the combined fleet spread across space like a metal constellation. 10,000 ships, the greatest military force in galactic history, preparing to rain destruction on the planet ahead. As Ben flew closer to the swarm defenses, he activated a special communication system he had been working on for weeks. Instead of standard military frequencies, the system transmitted something unprecedented: mathematical poetry that expressed concepts of peace and understanding, musical frequencies that represented sorrow and hope, images from human history showing both destruction and rebirth. The swarm defensive ships detected his approach. Ben watched as dozens of biomechanical vessels moved to intercept him, their organic hulls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Weapon ports opened like hungry mouths. Energy readings spiked as they prepared to fire. But the weapons did not fire. Ben's shuttle continued its approach, broadcasting its strange messages. The swarm ships followed, surrounding him but not attacking. Ben realized they were confused by his transmissions. They had never encountered anything like mathematical poetry or musical representations of emotion. As Ben entered the atmosphere of the swarm homeworld, he saw the planet's surface in detail for the first time. The biomechanical cities were vast and complex, stretching across continents. But something was wrong with them. Many structures looked damaged or incomplete. Large areas of the planet appeared empty, as if the population had once been much larger. Ben's shuttle was guided by swarm ships to a landing platform near the planet's largest city. As he powered down the engines, he could see swarm creatures moving around the platform. They were smaller than the reports had suggested, about the size of humans but with 4 arms and crystalline skin that shifted color with their movements. Ben opened the shuttle door and stepped out, carrying no weapons. In his hands, he held a simple translation device and a small container of water from Earth. The water was an offering, a symbol of life and growth that every species in the galaxy could understand. The swarm creatures surrounded him, their crystalline skin flashing with rapid color changes. Ben realized the colors were a form of communication. He activated his translation device and began to speak. "I am Ben Torres of Earth," he said slowly. "I come seeking understanding." The colors on the swarm creatures shifted to deep blues and purples. The translation device struggled with their response, producing only fragments. Pain, loss, fear, ending. More swarm creatures arrived, including larger ones that Ben assumed were leaders or elders. Their skin patterns were more complex, with layers of color that seemed to tell stories. Ben continued to broadcast his peaceful intentions, showing them images of Earth's oceans and forests, of human families, of the beauty that existed alongside the tragedy of war. Gradually, the swarm creatures led Ben deeper into their city. He saw the damage more clearly now. Buildings that had been repaired many times, memorial sites where crystalline structures grew in complex patterns, population centers that were mostly empty. Finally, Ben was brought to the heart of the city, where a massive creature waited. This was clearly the Swarm Queen, 10 times larger than the others, her crystalline skin displaying patterns of incredible complexity. Ancient scars marked her surface, and her colors were deep and sad. Through the translation device, Ben began to understand her story. The swarm had not always been warriors. They had once been peaceful, living in harmony with their environment. But their homeworlds had been destroyed in an ancient war, forcing them to become nomads in space. For centuries, they had searched for new homes, only to be attacked by species who feared their appearance. Every attempt at peaceful contact had ended in violence. Every offer of friendship had been met with weapons. Over time, grief and desperation had turned them into the very monsters their enemies believed them to be. "We strike because we believe all species seek our extinction," the Queen communicated through shifting patterns of color. "We have learned that the galaxy has no place for creatures like us." Ben listened to her story, understanding now why the war had been so brutal. The swarm fought with the fury of a species that believed it faced complete annihilation. Every battle was a fight for survival against a galaxy that had rejected them. "But what if you were wrong?" Ben asked. "What if there were species willing to accept you?" The Queen's colors shifted to patterns Ben had not seen before. The translation device struggled to interpret them. Hope, impossible. Too much pain. Too many dead. As they spoke, alarms began sounding across the city. The Queen's colors flashed to urgent reds and oranges. Ben realized the combined fleet had begun its attack. In the distance, he could see energy beams striking the planet's orbital defenses. The final assault had started. "They will destroy us all," the Queen said, her colors now displaying clear resignation. "As they always planned." Ben pulled out his personal communicator and tried to contact the flagship. Static filled the channel. The battle had already progressed too far for simple communication to stop it. "There is another way," Ben said urgently. "You can stop this. Call off your defenses. Show them you want peace." The Queen's colors cycled through complex patterns of doubt and fear. "And if they continue to attack? If this is another deception?" Ben looked around at the swarm creatures gathered in the chamber. Thousands of them, their skin flickering with nervous colors. All of them waiting for their Queen's decision. All of them facing possible extinction. "Then at least you will have tried," Ben said. "At least you will have chosen hope over fear." The Queen was silent for a long moment, her colors moving through slow, deep patterns. Then she began to communicate with her people, sending commands that spread throughout the city and across the planet. Ben watched as the swarm's defensive weapons powered down. Their orbital platforms stopped firing. Their ships began broadcasting surrender signals. On his communicator, Ben could hear confused voices from the combined fleet. Admiral Kess demanding to know why the swarm had stopped fighting. Other commanders arguing about whether this was a trap or a genuine surrender. Ben activated his communicator and broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Ben Torres. The swarm is offering surrender. They want to negotiate. Hold your fire." "Commander Torres," Admiral Kess's voice crackled through the static. "You are no longer part of this operation. The swarm cannot be trusted." "Look at your tactical displays," Ben replied. "Their weapons are powered down. Their ships are broadcasting surrender codes. They are not fighting back." Through the chamber's viewing ports, Ben could see the battle slowing. Some ships in the combined fleet had stopped firing. Others continued their attack, apparently following different orders. The confusion was spreading through both fleets. The Swarm Queen spoke again, her colors now showing a mixture of hope and terror. "They are not all stopping. Some still attack." Ben realized that the combined fleet was splitting into factions. Some commanders were willing to accept the surrender. Others, following Admiral Kess's orders, continued the assault. The situation was becoming more dangerous by the moment. "I need to get back to the fleet," Ben told the Queen. "I need to stop this before it destroys any chance for peace." The Queen's colors shifted to patterns of understanding. She issued new commands, and Ben was quickly escorted back to his shuttle. But as he prepared to leave, she spoke one final time. "Human Ben Torres," she said, "you have shown us something we thought lost forever. Whatever happens, we will remember that one creature chose to see us as more than monsters." Ben piloted his shuttle back toward the combined fleet, broadcasting constantly on all frequencies. He could see the battle continuing around the planet, with some ships withdrawing while others pressed their attack. The careful coordination that had defined the fleet for 3 years was breaking down. As Ben approached the flagship, he was surrounded by escort ships. Admiral Kess's voice filled his communication system. "Commander Torres, you will be arrested for treason and abandoning your post." "Admiral," Ben replied calmly, "look at what is happening. Half your fleet has stopped firing. The swarm is surrendering. You can end this war without destroying an entire species." "The swarm cannot be trusted," Kess repeated. "This is clearly a deception." Ben's shuttle was pulled into the flagship's docking bay by tractor beams. Security forces waited as he disembarked, but before they could arrest him, Captain Mills and a group of human soldiers stepped forward. "Admiral Kess," Mills said firmly, "we request a full council meeting to discuss this surrender offer." "There is nothing to discuss," Kess replied. "The attack continues." But around the docking bay, Ben could see other species representatives arriving. The aquatic depths dwellers, the energy beings, even some Cronians. All of them demanding answers about why their ships had stopped firing. The situation was spiraling beyond Admiral Kess's control. The careful unity of the combined fleet was fracturing along species lines. Some wanted to accept the surrender. Others demanded the complete destruction of the swarm. Ben realized this was the moment that would define not just the end of the war, but the future of galactic civilization. Would they choose the path of understanding and mercy, or would they choose fear and destruction? As security forces moved to arrest him, Ben looked up at Admiral Kess. Her crystalline form was flickering with angry light patterns. For 3 years, she had commanded respect through authority and age, but now, faced with an unprecedented situation, her certainty was becoming a weakness. "Admiral," Ben said quietly, "you have a choice to make. You can either be remembered as the leader who ended a war, or as the one who destroyed any hope for peace in this galaxy." The moment stretched on, filled with tension and possibility. Around them, representatives of a dozen species waited to see which path their leaders would choose. Above them, the greatest fleet in galactic history hung in space, its weapons pointed at a planet where 50 billion creatures waited to learn their fate. Everything depended on what happened next.